Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make small peach hand pies. Gluten-free, of course. And a hand pie is exactly what it sounds like. It's a little pie that fits in your hand. And today I'm actually using freeze-dried peaches. I put these in my freeze dryer in August, or it was September. You know, when peaches were in season, and I got a whole bunch of them, and I showed you how to can peaches. And then I decided to freeze dry some. And so now I've got them for a recipe like this. I've never used my freeze-dried peaches before, so you'll get to experience this at the same time as me. And I've got 2 bags here. I didn't write an amount down of how many peaches are in here. And so I'm just kind of winging it today. So I don't want to open both bags until I kind of eyeball the amount in this bag. I'm going to be making my basic double crust pie crust recipe. It's in my cookbook. It's also here on my channel. I don't have the exact amount of little hand pies that this recipe will make. It just depends on how big you make them. Same thing with the filling. It depends on how big your hand pies are and how much filling you put in them. So I usually just kind of eyeball, and then if I have extra filling left over, it's just a basic fruit filling. You can put it in oatmeal, you can put it in muffins, you can just eat it, whatever you like to do with leftover fruit filling. Put it on ice cream. So I'm gonna open up my bag here, and I do have an oxygen absorber. I'm gonna take that out, and then dump out my peaches. And you can hear they sound like glass, kind of. So what I'm gonna do is, so I don't have to chop them up, I'm just gonna break them into kind of bite-sized pieces here. And if you're new to my channel, you might not be aware that I have a freeze dryer. I do have some freeze drying videos here on my channel. And as you can see, when I freeze dried my peaches, I left the skins on. And my freeze dryer, it is a Harvest Right freeze dryer. If you use my Harvest Right affiliate link in the description box below, it is nothing extra for you to use my link, but it does earn me a little bit of extra money that helps me bring you freeze drying videos that are gluten-free. So there's all of my peaches cut up. Now when you're rehydrating or reconstituting your freeze-dried fruits or vegetables, I start out with a little bit of water. And I didn't add hardly any water at all. I would rather my peaches be a little bit on the crunchy side, and then I can always add more water. If you add too much, then they get waterlogged, and then that would make for a really wet filling, which you can save. We could just add a little bit of flour to our filling, but I like my filling to be mostly fruit. So I'm going to add a little bit more water here. One of the things I love about freeze-dried fruit, you can powder it down in a food processor or a blender, and you can make a fruit powder. Fruit powders are delicious. You can add them into so many different things. One of the things that I like to add fruit powder into is buttercream for cupcakes or cakes, things like that. It makes for a delicious fruit flavored filling, and it doesn't add a lot of extra liquid to your buttercream or your frosting. And you never really know how much water it will take to reconstitute something like peaches. I'm going to add a little bit more here and there. And then I'm going to let this just sit and rehydrate. And then I'm going to preheat my oven to 400. And I think 1 bag is going to be enough. And I will probably end up getting another cookie sheet, but right now I just have 1. And then I've got all of the ingredients for my pie crust. And I do have my flour mix video here on my channel, and I used to have a different glass container that I would put my flour mix in once I made a batch, and it was never big enough. And usually when I was making a batch of flour, I would just use whatever was left or put in a separate bowl and use that part first. Oh, about 6 months or so ago, I found this really large jar, and it is the perfect size. It fits 1 batch of my flour almost all the way to the top. And so I wanted to show you that today, that they do make jars big enough that you can fit 1 full batch in. And then it's just a screw top lid. It fits nicely in my fridge, And then I do have my little measuring scoop here. And I do get asked a lot of how I measure my flour. And you would think that there's not really that many ways to measure your flour, but there is. I don't ever weigh my flour, although I've heard that it's more exact. I've just never done it that way. And I know a lot of people will take their measuring cup and dip it in, but I don't do that either. Sometimes that packs in more flour than you want. And especially with gluten-free baking, gluten-free flours are a lot more absorbing than regular flour. So if you get extra gluten-free flour, you'll end up with a really dry, crumbly end result. So what I do is I take my little spoon that's in here and I really give it a good stir. Kind of fluff it up a little bit. And then of course, when it gets even lower in the container with the lid on, I'll just give it a really good shake. I'll take out the spoon first so it doesn't knock around in there. So once you've got it kind of fluffed up, I'll kind of sprinkle it in. We want this lightly in our measuring cup. Again, if you were to pack it down, you'd end up with more flour than you want in your baked goods. And then I just use my little spoon here and kind of level off the top. And then before I dump this in my bowl, I've got 2/3 cup plus 2 tablespoons of cut up butter. It's not right out of the fridge, but not quite room temperature yet. And we need 2 cups of flour. So there's my 2 cups of flour. And then I've got 1 teaspoon of salt. I also have a video here on my channel of making just a pie crust. So I'll just very quickly make this pie crust. So once it looks like this, where it's becoming bigger chunks, but it still is kind of crumbly, get in here with my hand and pick some up. And you want to squish it together. And when it holds together, it's ready. Have a bowl scraper here. It really is helpful for scraping your bowl. So I start bringing it all together. So once your pie crust is all, well, it's not pie crust yet. It's pie dough right now. Once you get it all together, I like to make sure that it is all sticking together. And then I am going to cut it in half. Doesn't have to be exact. I find that it's easier to roll this dough out in halves rather than the entire amount in one fell swoop. And if I move my peaches to one side, I do have some liquid in here. But I do have some pieces of peach that are not fully rehydrated yet. So I'm just stirring it all around. I am going to add just a little bit of extra water because I do want a little bit of kind of a sauce in with my peach pie filling. And I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of honey. And that little bit of extra water in there will help me mix around my honey. And what I'm going for with these hand pies today is kind of a fresh peach flavor. I've got a half a teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of ginger. Use your favorite spices that you like to go with peaches. And it would be so much easier if I had a deeper bowl to stir this all around. But I'm using a really shallow bowl so my peaches really absorb that liquid and it's not just waterlogged on the bottom of the bowl and then the top layer doesn't quite have enough liquid. So I'm going to set this aside and see how much more liquid my peaches will absorb. If I end up with too much liquid, I can add a little bit of flour if I feel like I need to. I put my pie dough in the fridge. If at any point you feel like your pie dough is getting really difficult to manage because your kitchen is really hot, stick it in the fridge or the freezer. I'm just going to go a little bit of flour here. And I'm going to roll out 1/2 of the dough at a time. Kind of flatten it, give it a head start. I've got my rolling pin here. Give it a little bit of flour. And then you want to keep it moving. You don't want to add in a lot of extra flour, but you don't want it to stick either. And I like to pick it up and flip it over. And because I'm not making a pie, I'm not worried if it's not in a circle. Make sure you can still move it around. If you notice that it starts to crack in the middle, just press it together. And then I always feel it. I find that this is the best way to make sure that it's all the same thickness. And I don't even have an exact measurement to give you on how thick this is. Some people like really thick pie crust. Some people like really thin. I will say for something like a hand pie, I go a little bit on the thicker side than if I were making a regular pie. Only because you want it to be able to hold together in your hand. And you may or may not have seen these before. You might even have one. And I have one, and it doesn't work. It does. It just doesn't work on gluten-free pie crust. Gluten-free pie crust, it doesn't bend. And so when you cut out your circle, which I find this is actually really handy to cut out a circle, but then when you go to put it in here, and then you put in your filling, and you fold it over, it just breaks right apart. And maybe if I use xanthan gum or something like that, my pie crust would be a little more flexible. But I don't mind. I have a way that I make my hand pies. So maybe one day I will figure out a gluten-free pie crust that will make a little hand pie using this little machine. But until then, I have a little cottage cheese container that is actually the same size, just about, as the bottom of this. So if you have some extra flour here, just kind of rub it around. And then I'm going for about 4 circles out of this first rolling of dough. And don't worry, this is gluten-free dough. We can re-roll it. It's not the sharpest edge to cut out circles, but it's all right. Hopefully I can get 4. Looks like I'm only going to get 3. And then I've got my little bench scraper here. Just going to go along and peel away the dough that we don't need. There, we've got 1 circle onto our cookie sheet. Almost, not quite. And I really like this size for a hand pie. If you have something smaller, then use that. So then just bring your dough back together. This one I'm trying to keep in a square. Maybe you don't like round hand pies. So this is mostly a square. What I'm going to do is cut it into 4 triangles. And then we've got 4 pieces. Whoop, don't gouge out your crust there. Then we've got 4 pieces that will make 2 hand pies. I've got all of my dough rolled out. I've got some triangles. That one's kind of a square. And then I've got my circles. And I'm just revisiting my peaches here, giving everything a really good stir. And it is a little bit more liquidy than I would like it to be. And it's much darker because of the cinnamon. So I'm just gonna go not even a quarter of a cup. I'm just gonna sprinkle in a little bit of flour. I don't want my filling to be so runny that it makes my crust soggy. But I don't want it to be so dry that it's kind of like a paste inside my pies. And I think that is looking perfect. It still is a little bit juicy, but not too thick and not too runny. And I've got 1 egg here mixed with a little bit of water, just to make it a little bit more fluid to spread on top of our pies once we get them all filled. And then I've got a little pastry brush, and then I've got a dry fork, not one that I mixed with the egg. So now we just assemble. Let's do our triangles first. Now you can see that my triangles are kind of misshapen, and that's fine. So what you want to do is put in enough filling that it will be a nice amount, but not so full that it will burst out of the seam. And because this is a triangle, I kind of go in the triangle shape. And then because gluten-free dough does not bend and it does not fold very well without breaking, you cut your dough in as many pieces so you can make a top and a bottom. And then try and measure out which ones will match the best. That one looks really good, and that looks like I've got a nice amount of filling in there. So then just take your fork and we'll crimp the edges. I need some flour. Dip your fork in some flour. Oh, see, and I already got some filling coming out of that one. That is all right. Now, if you felt like your edges were not sticking together, you could dampen them a little bit with water or the egg wash, but this is usually enough, is just pressing it together with your fork. And then I take a sharp knife and I'll go 2 slits. And then move on to the next one. And if you get some extra juice that is from your filling, you can seal the edges with that. Look at that, we'll do that. Now, if you've got your filling too full and your top starts to crack, that's it, it's okay. Because we are going to cut slits in it anyways, but you don't want it to be a big gaping hole. There goes some more of my filling out the side. And if you cut your circle in half, you can do the same thing. Gently press. And these don't spread out, but you don't want them to be super crowded together. You want to give them room so that they bake evenly, but you don't want them super crowded or touching on your cookie sheet. And you don't have to use parchment paper, but whenever you're using a sticky fruit mixture like this and the filling possibly will spill out, it just makes for easy cleanup. And because I'm squishing some of my filling out already. And it looks like I'm getting low on my peach filling, but I have a remedy for that. Gently press it down. I've run out of filling, but you know what I've got right here? I've got a little teeny tiny bit left of strawberry cherry jam that I also made last year. And I'm even going to use the same dirty spoon. And look at this. Not even very much left at all. There we go. This one's going to be a little skimpy on the filling. That's all right though. It just goes to show, you can fill these little pockets with whatever you want. You could even make these savory. All you have to do is make, a beef filling or a hamburger filling, a chicken filling. Kind of similar to a handheld chicken pot pie. If you'd like to see me make a chicken pot pie or maybe a savory hand pie like this, meat and cheese filling would be delicious. Let me know in the comments. Sounds delicious to me. So now we just need to give these an egg wash. If you don't want to use egg for an egg wash, you could use a little bit of milk. And for that matter, if you wanted to, you could sprinkle on some sugar or some cinnamon. But I really just like what the egg wash does. It makes it a really nice golden brown color. Switcheroo here. This one is really big. But you know, this just goes to show you can make them big or small. Okay, these will go in the oven again at 400 for about 20 to 30 minutes. It depends on how big they are. It depends on the filling. And then it also depends on your oven. But because I have 2 trays at once, I will stop about 15 minutes in and switch them around in the oven. So my hand pies went for about 25 minutes. And then I like to remove them to a cooling rack. You don't have to, but I like to. When I've made these before and I leave them on the cookie sheets, they don't really continue cooking and they don't really get soggy. But I like to put them on a cooling rack just to help them stay crispy. If you have a really big one like this one, make sure you've got a spatula that can handle that. I'm gonna have to start labeling every video. Make it your own. So many of my videos, I always say, use your favorite ingredients. And of course, the classic, this can be made differently every single time. So now what I'm gonna do is move my cookie sheets out of the way because they are hot. And then just take the parchment that was on the cookie sheet and put it underneath my cooling racks. It doesn't completely cover, but that's all right. Be very careful. Now, because mine are still warm, I'm going to brush my glaze on now. But you could wait till they're completely cooled off. And for that matter, you can make the glaze however you like. I've got 2 tablespoons of butter with about 2 tablespoons of honey. It's really soft. I've been mixing it around. And then I'm just going to brush it on my hand pies. The heat from the hand pies will help melt my honey and my butter to kind of sink in to the crust. I don't want to use melted butter and honey because then it will mostly just run off. And you really don't need very much. Now, if you wanted to use a traditional powdered sugar glaze, you would just mix powdered sugar with a little bit of milk until it's kind of a glaze consistency. And then you can brush it on or drizzle it on or even dip your hand pies in the powdered sugar glaze. They sure look good, don't they? I was worried that I wouldn't be able to tell which one is my cherry strawberry jam pie, but it's this one. It's really flat. Even though my honey butter is not melting, if it was melting, it would drip on the parchment and just make for easy cleanup. So my hand pies are all cooled off and they really smell delicious. And I think they look really cute too. You bring them closer so you can see. And it just goes to show you can make them any size that you want. These actually kind of look like a Pop-Tart. Speaking of Pop-Tarts, I could make those gluten-free as well. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video on that. But you know, I can't decide which ones I like better. Triangle, circle, or these little half circle ones. I think they all look so good. And then here's what the bottom looks like. And you can hear how crispy it is. And there is our delicious peach filling. Sure looks delicious. These are perfect. Just the right amount of fruit filling, just the right amount of sweetness. My crust is super flaky. And you know, my freeze-dried peaches are delicious. They have that fresh peach flavor, which is exactly what I was hoping for. And they've reconstituted so well. And the inside is not soggy at all. And you saw the bottom. All of them are super golden and super crispy. And the filling goes almost all the way to the edges. You don't have to have freeze-dried fruit to make these hand pies. I just wanted to try it out and see what would happen, and it works perfectly. Canned peaches would work really well in this, and you could cook the filling if you want to, or you can leave them fresh, drain off as much liquid, and then just add a little bit of flour if you feel like it's too runny. You could put apple pie filling in here. You could put lemon filling in here. There are so many possibilities with a little hand pie like this. And it's a perfect way to use fruit that you preserved last year. As we saw, my little flat one here that has jam inside of it. Whether you can your own fruit, freeze it, or freeze dry it like I have. This is the perfect dessert or even a little snack in the middle of winter. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. Maybe you've already made my pie crust. It's in my cookbook. It's also here on my channel. Yet another way to use the same recipe. And how fun are these? And delicious. And you can put whatever kind of filling you want on the inside. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.